abuse of.
What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome to this week's broadcast of Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm your host, Tony Sweet.
And I'm Eddie Connor. And with us in studio is our guest co-host, Walt Lusk.
Well, we are thrilled to have back with us Emmy Award-winning producer and investigative reporter, Linda Moulton Howe, and she is going to be on our first 2-hour special.
Ooh, and we can't wait. Now, as you might remember, during our last visit with Linda, she truly had our audience on the edge of their seats when she spoke about cattle mutilations. And now she brings us more of her in-depth research on topics that most people don't speak about during their daily lives, but we certainly do here on Truth Be Told.
You'll also recognize Linda from her informative talks on Coast to Coast AM. Because of her expertise, she is often sought for, such as Ancient Aliens, and also numerous other radio and television outlets from around the world.
Tonight, our fans will effortlessly tour the universe with Linda as she informs the world about events happening right here, right now as we speak. Some of these events are everything from extraterrestrials to other unknown cover-ups that she's always bravely shedding her investigative light upon. Plus, you can gain even more in-depth information and insight by visiting her website at earthfiles.com. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please put your Truth Be Told hands together and welcome back author, producer, and investigator Linda Moulton Howe. Hi, welcome back to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Eddie Connor.
I'm Tony Sweet.
And I'm Walt Lusk.
And we have with us today author, producer, and investigator Linda Moulton Howe. And you can find out more about her and all of her extraordinary work by going to earthfiles.com. That's earthfiles.com. And Tony, jump back in and let's talk about the Milky Way.
Well, since we were already there, she took us on this journey, so we might as well stay there and talk about some of the strangest star light patterns in the Milky Way. Are they megastructures? Or what are they, Linda?
Help us.
Enlighten us.
Talking about what all of us now just call KIC without going into all the numbers. KIC made headlines about a month ago when it was Yale, it was Penn State. There was a paper that came out about a sun 1,480 light years from Earth, KIC and a bunch of numbers. They're actually 84, 62, 85, 2, but we'll call it KIC. That for 4 years, this is very important. This is 4 years of observations in which the first 2 years they were seeing on this one sun and one sun only out of 150,000 stars being examined under what's called the Planet Hunters Project. They were looking for 1% dimming. This has been the average when we have looked at suns trying to see if they would have a solar system going around them. And on average, when there was a planet, there's been a 1% dimming. They notify everybody, take a look at this star. There is a dimming, probably planets. And then we get these headlines about we found another, either a super planet or an Earth-like planet, or all these headlines we've been getting the last 10 years. That's what that's about. Well, so they started this scanning, and between the constellation of Cygnus and the constellation of Orion, right sort of in the middle of those two big constellations, is this star KIC 84, 62, 85, 2. And it was civilians trying to help on analyzing all these 150,000 stars that let the scientists know that they were seeing 5% dimming, 10% dimming, 15% dimming in the first 2 years of the Planet Hunters. So it stood out. There was nothing else doing that. Then, in the last 2 years, there was a dimming that went down to 22%. There has been nothing in the history of looking for dimmings around stars, looking for planets, that has ever gone down to 22%. And not only was it dimmed by 22%, the scientists who began studying this strange star became convinced, and I'm going to read to you from the work of, it's very important that you hear what he says directly.
That's great.
This is Jason Thomas Wright, PhD. He's the Associate Professor of Astronomy and Astrophysics at Penn State at University Park, Pennsylvania. He has been working with another astronomer who was in charge of the Planet Hunters. And his task, interestingly enough, was if there was something artificial around a star, like the science fiction has said that if you get civilizations advanced enough and they could get energy from stars, that you would end up finding huge structures built, constructed, intelligent construction around or near or encircling stars that would be the source for entire solar systems for energy, not like we putting plugs into walls. This would be a whole different level of civilization, what Michio Kaku would call a civilization 3 and we're a 0, that a civilization 3 would be able to harvest from suns all the energy they would need. So think in those terms. And what Professor Wright was challenged with was, can you come up with a list of like 10 characteristics that might be associated with what we can look out at stars that would line up as these would be signatures of intelligent structures like what we're talking about, gathering energy for a civilization.
Right.
So he put together this protocol of 10, if it's this, if it's this, if it's this. KIC gets a check mark, yes, on every one of the characteristics on his protocol at Penn State for something that would have artificial structure.
Every criteria.
Now, he says, we don't know much about this star, but we do know that the dimmings take a long time to pass in front of the star. It takes weeks to pass in front of the star. And there aren't just 2 episodes. There are many episodes where the star gets 5% dimmer or 3% dimmer or 2% dimmer. There are many episodes where the star is getting dimmer. And the other thing is that when a star or a planet passes in front, the way that it would dim is characteristic. If something is circular and it crosses in front of a star, you will get a symmetric pattern. It will look like a bell-shaped curve because you have a circle passing in front of a circle. And that means that there will be a very steady decrease in the light coming from a circle against a circle. And then as it passes, there will be a steady increase as the circle leaves. That's what they mean, symmetric dimming. But in all cases of this KIC star, I'm quoting, that does not happen. The way that this star gets dimmer is not the way it gets bright. So it's asymmetric. And in fact, sometimes it gets dimmer and then it looks like it's going to get brighter again, but it gets dimmer again and it's even dimmer and it's random. That suggests that whatever is blocking the star's light has a very complex structure. So it is something, get this, so it is something the size of a star that's doing the blocking. But it's not a circle and it's not a sphere. It is something with a complex shape, and there is a lot of them. Now, I took the time to read those details from Penn State, and that was an interview that I had at Earth Files and on Coast to Coast, October 28th, 2015, and we're talking just a month later. Today, I found that just in the last 2 days, here is November 26th. This is from Tech Times. Headline would have been yesterday. Alien megastructure orbiting around star KIC 8462852 is likely swarm of comets, says astronomer. Well, I read this today, and when you think that they are putting this out now as that all of the 4 years, 22% dimming, matching up to the 10 protocol characteristics of advanced intelligent structure, especially 4 years, how could what has been happening at KIC for 4 years be explained by passing comets?
The same way two men shooting shotguns
At a weather balloon.
Yeah.
That's it. And now in this Tech Times article, it says, although the numbers, meaning these percentage dips, 22 and 15 and 5, although the numbers suggest that a planet is passing in front of a star, they go into the fact that it's not symmetrical. So this very article that had that headline, which is so misleading, they're basically arguing against the comet explanation. And it continues this way. It goes into why they are saying that it may be comets, and it has to do with infrared emissions and the very fact that they can't find dust residue is why they are saying it must be comets, because then they would melt, they would be destroyed, and there would be nothing left. But Professor Wright, on his characteristics, said, if we can't find dust, then we really have to look at the megastructure explanation. These people in the last 48 hours are taking what Professor Wright, I think, it seems to me anyway, logically argued, and they're turning it on its head and saying, because there is no infrared signature, therefore no dust, therefore it has to be ice and melted. But one of the things that I would suggest everybody ever listening to radio or looking at Earth Files or reading the New York Times, always read the last paragraph first.
That's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Last paragraph of this article. As for the alien megastructure hypothesis, quote, this is the scientist now who is arguing that it's comets. Yeah. It's the same person, quote, we cannot really say it is or is not, but what the star is doing is very strange. He added that it is interesting to have this kind of situation, which signifies that there is a new physical explanation or a new idea to be discovered. That's the last paragraph from the scientist who put out the hypothesis that all of KIC could be explained as passing comets. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the problems today.
Yep.
That there are, I'm going to say without having proof, but you can take this to the bank as kind of a rule on the web now. The counterintelligence world knows all they have to do is put out headlines that the vast majority of people do not read reports.
Not going to read it.
And they get a headline that directs the public in the direction they want to go, in this case, away from thinking about megastructures and KIC. So now all they've had to do is put out the idea, it's comets, there's nothing to see here, ladies and gentlemen, go along. But the very scientist that is being quoted, I just read to you in quotes what he has said. The complexity of so many subjects that demand people to read And to read 3 or 4 or 5 pages is the only way that you can actually truly understand most of the things that are happening today. And that I can't urge you and your listeners and viewers enough to say, always read the last paragraph first, but try to read at least one report a day, all the way from the beginning to the end on the subject that interests you the most. And you will see constantly how there's like a political bias is woven in to a lot of media coverage on things that are science, medicine, or other. But when you read whole articles, your own brain can begin to make more accurate conclusions than the headlines. The headlines are manipulative. The headlines often now are trying to get people to go to a website to click so they'll have money. It is driving so much stuff on the web. And the click for money, put up any headline that will get people to go, and people are not reading what the actual content is. If we're going to save the planet, if we're going to preserve anything resembling democracy in the United States, it's just my fervent feeling we cannot be turned into a generation that only knows multiple check tests that have nothing to do with trying to understand what's happening in the universe, what's happening in our solar system, what's happening in our sun, what's happening in our planet. And our very lives may depend on all of us beginning to pay more attention independent of headlines and political manipulation.
I think so too.
Wow.
Well, along I want to say we need to talk about somewhere along the way talk about headlines and political manipulation about the missile that was here on the West Coast.
Oh, that is such a fascinating story, and I am so grateful that a year or two ago,
There it is.
it was a mutilation story, and I get email and then a phone call from a man. He is retired. He's a Navy captain,
Yes.
Mark Wood. And he has helped me now in so many different subjects. He's highly analytical, extremely good with math, with GPS, with Google. He's really great. And so everybody remembers it was November 7th and 9th.
Saturday, November 7th. Yep.
Yeah. And here comes all of these images and videos that are coming into my email, your email, everybody's email. And with what is this? And some of the videotapes, that one long one that got on YouTube of a family, and you can hear them, what the F is this? And they're going on and on and on. And what is absolutely true, even when I'm talking about the complexities of trying to understand what we're really dealing with, I'm looking at the video. Everybody's looking at the video. And for all the world, everybody is saying it in their emails and on video. It's moving from south to north. How many times was that printed and stated? It's moving from south to north. And the first videos, the first reports came from San Francisco, not LA. So there was this breathtaking photograph that I used at Earth Files that was taken by a professional photographer with the Golden Gate.
You happen to be at the right place at the right time.
And it's just a magnificent photo of something that I just sat. What am I looking at?
WTF.
So I started sending emails to Mark Wood. He's in Florida. I'm in Albuquerque, so I'm Mountain Time. He's East Coast time. He said, Linda, let me take a look at this, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. So I did an Earth Files report on the 13th. We had the 7th and the 9th were 2 launches. The first one, and I'm now using the word launch, November 7th was the mystery. That was nighttime.
Yeah.
The 9th was a second launch, and that was daytime. And as Mark told me, he said they obviously did it in the daytime because whatever they were trying to test or do on the night of the 7th, it went way beyond. If they were trying to see if the public was paying attention to anything anymore, they got it in spades. Yeah. So the second launch was daytime. Nobody would ever be able to see it. No one did. But the Navy on the 10th, here is the quote. This came on a press release from Lockheed Martin, Sunnyvale, California, November 10th. Quote, the U.S. Navy tested 2 Trident, Roman numeral 2, D as in dog, 5, fleet ballistic missiles, November 7th and 9th in the Pacific Ocean. One of the missiles shown here shortly after its launch was from, remember, this is Lockheed Martin.
They make the coolest stuff.
Yeah. And what they're saying in this official explanation, this was launched from a submerged submarine. Okay, that was Lockheed Martin on the 10th. Now, Mark Wood, the retired Navy captain, he emails me and he is explaining that Point Mugu Naval Base, which did confirm independently that it was, what they call that is when they say source of launch, that is a military code. Point Mugu was manager, but they could have been 1,000 miles out in the Pacific. A lot of people don't understand this. They could still say Point Mugu in California was the source. And it's launch source control, but it's not there. And so Point Mugu Naval Base, northwest of Long Beach, California, is 400 miles southeast of San Francisco, 400 miles. And yet thousands of eyewitnesses from Los Angeles to San Francisco to Nevada, Arizona, Mexico, and Idaho reported, and some photographed and videotaped, a blue and white missile-like object moving, everybody said, from south to north. So where was it launched from? And how could people in all of that region see it? Now let's go to Mark Wood. He's 65 years old now. He is a retired Navy captain. He had a quarter century in the U.S. Navy. He was an airborne navigator. He did search and rescue. He did anti-submarine warfare. He graduated in 1971 from Georgia Tech in Atlanta. He has an engineering degree in aerospace engineering. He worked in the Navy constantly calculating, working with satellites, working with GPS. The guy is really good at what he does. And he takes a look at all of this. And here is one of his very important insights from a long memo. I'm just doing excerpts. I noticed that none of the online postings mentioned anything about hearing any sounds. Nobody talked about any sound. This would indicate that the missile was launched far offshore. This points to a ship or sub-launched missile. So absolutely, when Lockheed said it was from a submarine that surfaced, that makes all the sense in the world to Mark. However, due to the staging, it eliminates Harpoon or Tomahawk missiles and points to a sub-launched Trident. The Navy said that a Trident was fired from the USS Kentucky. I checked, and the Kentucky is a Pacific Fleet submarine based in Bremerton, Washington. There are a couple of reasons why a Trident would be fired during a fleet exercise, which is what they were supposed to be having. And remember, it was only the day or two before the 7th that came this mysterious headline out of the Los Angeles media that all traffic, air traffic, was going to be blocked for a solid week from LAX going west over the Pacific. Yeah. And everybody got that first before any of this happened on Friday and Sunday. Was it connected? I mean, that still actually is a mystery, but Mark is saying there was this fleet exercise. Now, he goes on and says that testing of any subsea sensors and land-based early warning radars might have been the point, since the possibility is that Chinese or Russian ballistic missile submarines are beginning to patrol off the California coast. Now, I think that is true because what also has been going on just for the last 2, 3, 4 months, there have been all kinds, I know this personally from pilots who have gotten in touch with me. Russia, just like Turkey and Syria, Russia has been sending jets along the Pacific coast. And we have scrambled many times. Not much of this has been made public. We've been scrambling up with Russian jets skirting along the West Coast. And so Mark is tying this into Chinese or Russian ballistic missile submarines, that would be underwater, not in the air, are beginning patrols off the California coast. Since the SOSUS undersea array system is no longer used, it is highly likely that in addition to satellite observations, the Navy has new subsea sensors, and the early warning radars can always use training, especially on live fire missiles. Summary, first and foremost, the 2 Trident launches were from the USS Kentucky, not from an island, which had been reported that it was on an island off of Point Mugu. This turns out that it was way far out in the Pacific from underwater. He said nobody so far knows the exact position of the missile launch, but for argument's sake, he picks a position in heading to Kwajalein. And Kwajalein is an island out in the Pacific, in an area where we used to do bomb tests. And now he did maps that I showed at Earth Files that the motion away from observers as this missile will be moving away from the West Coast at 13,600 miles an hour.
Pretty quick.
And in 5 minutes, as the videos online at YouTube and social media showed, the missile traveled, where people could see it in Idaho and San Francisco. But Mark shows on all of these calculations on a map that it ends up, when those videotapes were made in San Francisco, they'll look like they're right over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
They were probably 1,100 miles west and south of the coast.
That's a long way.
It is an education on trigonometry.
Yeah.
It's an education on living on a sphere in which things launched in orbit from a perspective on land to something over the sea, that if we think it's going south-north, there's no guarantee that that is the actual case. And Mark's making this point.
Yeah.
And he says, thus, the observers assumed that they saw an unidentified object moving from south to north, but in fact, the missile was moving west, some 1,100 miles at 13,600 miles an hour. And the Navy said it did come down on or around Kwajalein Island, which is exactly what Mark was using for his calculations. So finally, due to the curvature of the Earth, by the time that the people on shore saw the engine flames, the missile was already at a significant altitude. And at that time, the missile was traveling at the 13,600 miles an hour. And it still leaves, and Mark agrees, it leaves the mystery. Why would the United States Navy do this at 6 p.m., starting off of Los Angeles, as if to test what will public reaction be, and nobody was prepared for the volume of people who started contacting social media everywhere.
Yeah.
It was huge. I mean, I remember I was inside, so I didn't get to see it.
I saw it.
Walt saw it. Here
Yeah,
in
I
Los
saw
Angeles,
it.
So
I was in Long Beach when I saw it. I wasn't that far off the coast. It looked like a big. To me, I didn't see the blue. I saw white. It looked like a big, like floodlight that was just hanging in the sky because it was. It was not a clear night. There was there was fog and stuff, and I knew it wasn't a UFO. I wasn't freaking from that, but I knew it wasn't something that you're going to see again. And I didn't have any clue what it was, but it just sat there and it was quiet. It's like you saw this big floodlight in the sky.
Well, and Mark and several people said it could very well have been a not so subtle Russia, China. Look, you don't know what this is. Nobody knows what this is, but we're able still to propel huge, powerful. If that had a nuclear missile in it, which is what they're designed to do, it would go a very long way. And it was, we can go from here to Kwajalein with this, and we can target it.
Now you're saying this is U.S. or is this might have been Russia's or China's?
This would be, what I mean is the U.S.
It was U.S.'s. Okay.
Yeah, it was rattling sabers. That was U.S. Navy. Yeah, that was two U.S. Navy tests.
Right.
So it could have been at this troubled time. Look, we're letting you on notice. We're still capable of controlling, guiding, and bringing down to a target that if it had a nuclear weapon in it, we could hit you. That might have been the underlying message.
You were saying that it's been proven that just not released that Russia has sent planes down the coast.
Yeah.
Where are you hearing the planes are coming from? From ships or from a base up north in Russia? I mean, because that's a long ways to come.
Yeah. No, it's a very good question. And the assumption has to be that where the Bering Strait is that goes into Alaska, whatever Russia has there, I'm sure NSA, CIA, DIA, they know everything that's going on. But when Russia is clearly testing what is our reaction when their planes come down the West Coast. That you can just say that is now that's been happening. There's a test. And in a funny, strange way, what just went on between Turkey and Russia.
Yes.
If it's true that Russia had been looping around, zooming around that border 10, 12 times, whatever the number.
Yep.
And finally, Turkey said, knock it down. That Turkey is feisty. Turkey has always been feisty.
Yes.
And the very fact that they waited several times, according to many different observations, that Russia had come over that border or at the border several times, you could say that Turkey even exhibited patience or restraint, and then knocked that Russian craft out of the sky. And now Russia is going to be posturing that they're going to put those ground missile launchers in there, and that if Turkey does X, Y, and Z, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. So there's posturing aggression.
Yeah, there is. There's economic stuff going on too between the two countries.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it is a chessboard now.
Yeah.
We're in a very complicated chessboard on this planet because the men that are driving these complicated aggressions, their exact agendas are not clear.
Yeah, Putin actually makes me nervous. Not too many people make me nervous, but he makes me nervous. He always seems like he's looking for a fight. Like he's ready, go ahead.
He loves his country and he's willing to do whatever he can to protect it and promote it.
Does he really love his country?
Yes. He's a Russian.
Well, that doesn't mean he loves his country.
Well, some people who love things behave in an unhealthy way, and other people who love things treat it healthily.
Right.
It was on CNN last night, and one of the CIA retired said, never forget he was KGB.
KGB comrade.
And he said, you have to look
KGB.
at Putin always through the KGB lens, and the KGB obsession is with Russia. In other words, his expansion into the Ukraine, he could claim Crimea. He could even say, we're going to claim back Kazakhstan.
Yes.
Kazakhstan was the second biggest republic in the old Soviet Union. And it extends all the way from it's the Caspian Sea to China, from all the Stan countries in the south to the Russian border. Russia itself is now a northern border of Kazakhstan, which was part of the Russian Empire. And when you realize that he's making these moves, like he's trying to get back,
recreate
all of old Russia.
Yeah.
My God. I mean, what if that was his real agenda?
Well, he needs the natural resources of the Ukraine, which is one of the reasons why he probably took it, and the fact that he could, and he did.
It's gonna, yeah. Well, fingers
Yeah.
crossed that we don't end up with another nuclear World War III, because they keep saying now with the Syria and Turkey that this is kind of the beginning of World War III. So fingers crossed that the powers that be, from the heavens above, the UFOs will come in and say, you guys are idiots.
Tony, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's times like this that I keep thinking we need extraterrestrials.
Yes.
Well, I have a question, Linda, in relation to the show you did a little while ago about UFOs and the fact that everything seems to be very fragmented. You know, everybody's seeing things and this thing out there, and nobody's, by intentionally they're keeping it fragmented. And as a result of more awareness on the internet and things that you're doing, do you see less fragmentation and more unity going on, or is you still think it's pretty fragmented?
I think fragmentation is dominant. And it was only about 3 weeks ago, I was talking with somebody who, of all the people I know and have ever known, who has significant links to, we'll call it the concept of MJ-12,
Okay.
since World War II,
Yes.
trying to deal with the difficult ET situation. And I asked him, I said, are you aware of any planning in 2016 to open up that we're not alone in the universe? Because I've been told that it's been on a timeline for 7 years.
Yes.
That this is the year.
And it hasn't happened yet.
And he said, Linda, the inside right now is the most splintered, the most fighting that I have ever known in my career. So if the insiders are fighting each other, if the insiders are splintered into personal aggression over whether to tell truth, what to do, that is disturbing. The most splintered he's ever known.
Well, my understanding is if we don't do it, they're going to do it on on our time frame, and we control the discussion of it. And I understand it's primarily through the U.S. up to this point. They, whoever they are, the ETs and extraterrestrials, are going to do it on their time frame and their way, and they're going to control the conversation. And obviously, it's going to be totally different than what people would expect.
And there's the other option that if this current model of standing up primate was put in motion for some reason that is now outdated,
Yes.
and we are the surface life at 7.2 billion and counting, and we're supposed to be at 10 billion in another 20 years, it's unsustainable. It's not sustainable on Earth for there to be 20 billion humans.
Population, yeah.
And or 10 billion. 10 billion. If the non-humans have done this for a bunch of reasons that included genetic harvest, terraforming the earth, mining, a lot of practical, it may be that if they have decided that we are so self-destructive that we really actually at this point in the timeline would launch, let's say, nuclear weapons, they'll just let us kill ourselves.
Thin the herd.
This is the end. In other words, it could be an opt of not doing anything lets the situation take care of itself, because we will eliminate ourselves and they will do something new.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like a parent. I mean, after a while, your kid keeps touching the stove. You're like, okay, touch the stove. You're going to burn yourself, and then you're either going to learn or you're going to pay the price. So I think, after a while, for how many millenniums that we keep making the same mistakes. So, I mean, one of these days they are going to say, go ahead, do what you need to do.
But there's something inside of me that wants to just say, if you made us, then you're responsible.
It's your mess.
Right.
You're responsible for some of this, not testosterone and aggression and all of this, and that the ETs don't get off scot-free in this. And maybe that's part of the reason why they continue to interact genetically, because maybe they are creating hybrids to replace us. But there is this big box. The big box is, what is allowable to do with life in this universe? Whether it is an advanced civilization that can harvest suns and they can make any life form they want, hybridized, completely robotic, which would be an organic android, anything on a bell-shaped curve. It may be like a political contest in which there is something raging between the divine field and the matter worlds, that this is a 13.9 billion universe, and there may be an infinite number of universes. And it may be that when life itself gets out of control, it gets out of control when it starts making other life that it makes do X, Y, and Z. That maybe there is a huge universal struggle going on about freedom and non-freedom at all kinds of levels. And on our planet right now, we are sort of like a metaphor for everything that's happened. And I bring that up. It's not an original thought to me. This has come up in many of the human abductions. I probably interviewed about 1,500 people in the human abductions over the last 35 years. And one of the themes is there are so many more dimensions than we understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that the dimensions are like, if you took a ring and you put red cellophane in it, like we used to do in TV studios to cast color in the back, and you cast a circle of red down onto a white piece of paper. Then you take a blue and you put it in. You're just adding blue on that red, but now the circle on the paper goes purple. And you can keep doing that until you have a black circle. And one physicist who gave me this, trying to help me understand the perspective on dimensions, every single frequency is a word for dimension in this metaphor, is still there. But with every frequency that you have put in the same place, there are layers, dimensions of different frequencies. And each of those cellophanes lies next to each other, but they are still independent and whole. You can pull out each cellophane and it will still be the pure red, the pure blue, the pure yellow. When you put them in overlaying, you are now casting something different on the circle. The circle would be our, let's say, our reality, and we don't know how to extract or reach or get to those different cellophanes, which represent different dimensional frequencies. And that physicist said to me, I think this is the truth of the universe. It's very akin to music. You've got 88 keys on a piano, and C is a frequency, D, E, and as you keep going up, all of those, just like the cellophane that you're putting light through, the keys on a piano are the same thing. Each frequency could be a dimension, 88 dimensions juxtaposed next to each other. We could live in middle C. Another civilization could be in D.
Yep.
And that there is a relationship between the keys, and there's a relationship between the color frequencies, and that someday we may learn how to access those frequencies and move interdimensionally. But we can't do that now.
No, we're too fragmented.
And
Even if we had a chance.
atomic bombs, that's what abductees were saying back in the 70s, that the release of the fission of an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb was tearing into other dimensions, and the non-humans could not allow that because we were like zero babies who knew nothing about other dimensions, did not understand the consequences. And as an airline pilot who had been in World War II told me, that he had knowledge that our government was told by something extraterrestrially, we will not allow you to destroy other dimensions, and that is why there were all those intrusions on all of our Minuteman bases. It happened in Russia.
Yeah, here.
It happened in England. There were intrusions all over this planet. The governments were going scared about what was going to happen. But the whole point was extraterrestrials were making sure there would be no nuclear explosion. So now we sit on the cusp of what everybody is feeling like, all of the Megiddo sounds of the Old Testament or the New Testament about an apocalypse. Would extraterrestrials then forcibly show themselves in order to say, this will not happen because the consequences are destroying other dimensions that you know nothing about? That would be a very healthy way to introduce them.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would be.
So here's my question. I'm coming from just the C average student here, but what makes this is very interesting is the people that probably created us, that have the technology, that really have no reason for our government to say don't reveal yourselves. I mean, they have the power to control our weapons, our diseases, our climate, everything. Why are they sitting back and letting our government create nuclear bombs and testings and all these things that are happening in the world? Why do they even let us do that instead of going, no, we're not going to let you create the atomic bomb that dropped, in Hiroshima and all these others? Why did they not step in and just say no to that a long time ago before they even got the technology?
Free will.
It is the I think it's the bottom line question that has always haunted me, because I just gave you we'll call it the friendly good ET facet.
Right. Yeah.
That there are many dimensions, and that with exploding bombs we're tearing into other dimensions, and that they stopped our Minuteman and intruded all over the planet to stop war. But just exactly as Lynn Buchanan was talking about his friendly and unfriendly and psychic and non-psychic categories, the chess game is not an idle metaphor. We are living in a complicated, multi-level chess game. I'm convinced of it, so is Lynn.
Yeah.
That our Earth has been the subject of intervention by all of these different types, terraforming, and they're not all on the same page at all. And some of them are in conflict. Some of them want humans. As Lynn said, there are unfriendlies out there that want every human being on this planet erased, not just killed. They want them evaporated. They don't want us here at all. So that goes to the heart of a question. Why would Albert Einstein have been born and perhaps had an interaction with some kind of ET? Because there's a story of him being under the basement of his house or something and having some experience with light or something, even in Einstein's background. And he wasn't talking. He couldn't talk as a child, all these strange things about Einstein. And then he suddenly comes up in the early 1900s with this concept of energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And general relativity is born. It's that formula that allowed the Manhattan Project. So if, as Lynn Buchanan would say, if there are non-humans who want us gone, and that there may be some universal constraint, I know this sounds like Star Trek, but it may be true, that there is some universal constraint on just going to the unfriendlies and killing them because they want to kill us off, but they want to kill us off in an indirect way. What better, insidious, intelligent, brilliant move could those unfriendlies make than to inspire in a human mind that is somehow made to be fertile for the kind of physics that Einstein was capable of doing, three-dimensional thought, with the idea it's like a counter move on the chess game. It isn't shooting with bullets. It isn't poisoning with poison. It's literally working through genetic creation of certain minds and container bodies throughout thousands of years. Einstein being a pawn move or a queen move on the chessboard by unfriendlies. I know this is this is complicated, but you can see where I'm headed.
Yeah.
Einstein could be a brilliant queen move that sets up a condition that will lead to the very bombs that the humans would then use to annihilate themselves. And then there are king chessmate moves by something that wants us to survive, wants us to evolve, and it does another move that somehow we end up being able to do Nagasaki and Hiroshima for reasons on this chess game that have to do with these arguments that are going on in the big political box about what's allowable to do with life. And as I'm speaking to you, I realize I'm speaking to you about what I really think is the context in which to look at all of this.
Yeah.
But I also realize that we have to communicate with audiences that still have to get to square one, that we're not alone. They have to get there. And with, proof. We're not there because we now have asymmetrical light dimming, let's say, on a star. And now we know that this is like the Freeman Dyson sphere, where he calculated how much energy a growing planet's population would need as it advanced. And you get to a point where you need all the energy of a sun all the time. That's the Freeman Dyson sphere. And that we're treading around a planet, our planet, beginning to understand how the 21st century that we are in now has no guarantee for life surviving. It's a sobering fact. It is beginning, I think, finally to be discussed rationally. But at the period at the end of that sentence, you guys get.
Yes.
Life is not guaranteed
Right.
on Earth if we mishandle ourselves, our environment, atomic bombs. So if there's something out there that wants us annihilated, and this is how they are doing it, that's a possibility.
And Linda, we have literally 2 minutes left. As always, time flies, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Who do you feel right now is the Bobby Fischer of this chess game that we're all pawns in?
What a great question.
Good job, Eddie.
Oh, what a great question.
Because it seems like they just keep taking turns, doesn't it?
Yeah. I totally grok what you're saying in the old Star Trek days. That is such a good question, and my mind is spinning. I think I think in my okay, what's congealing, and I know time's running. The divine field to me is the biggest box of all. Yes. And that the divine field has no entropy, has no destruction, is alpha to the omega, is steady state, and it is the source of all the matter worlds, no matter how many universes. There, the rubber meets the road in terms of who is responsible for what. The matter worlds are second to the divine field.
Yes.
At that level, jump down to earth. The divine field is still a solid ground in which to put a context for everything that we do and think. And at the moment of death, where do our souls want to go? Where do we want our souls to go?
To the light.
That is probably, to answer your question, that the chess master is the divine field.
Wow, that's amazing. Which leads back into aspects of free will per soul, per collected consciousness and non-physical, which goes back up to the divine field.
Yeah. I love you guys.
I love you too.
We love you, Linda.
Well, Linda,
Full circle.
I want to make sure, because people in the chat room have been asking questions. Since I own the network, I can go over a little bit. So, so here's the deal.
Rank has its privileges.
Somebody asked earlier, in fact, the last hour, have you been getting any new word of crop circles lately? Anywhere in the world have they been reported?
There was one down in Brazil 6 weeks ago, not the way you think of the perfection in Europe and sometimes in Canada and the United States. But when we move from August, as soon as we hit August of any Northern Hemisphere year, that's harvest, except for very small parts of Canada. So we will not have crop formations in the Northern Hemisphere until next April to May. That's year. Just it every year.
Next year.
So when it is our fall, winter, it becomes spring, summer in the Southern Hemisphere. Right. And that's why this one was a pattern reported by some news agencies in Brazil. And it may be that as we get into the winter months, depending upon what all forces are involved with this planet, this could be the 2015, 2016 could be the year when there are more complicated patterns finally in the Southern Hemisphere, just like in the Northern Hemisphere. And I know that begs the question, why is it that the Northern Hemisphere has for 30 years been the hemisphere where there have been the complex, beautiful, perfect crop formations and not in the Southern Hemisphere? And I have no idea.
The flip? Maybe it's the flip.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it could be headed that way.
I know. Maybe that's why. And then one last one, and this is, again, from the chat room. And where'd it go? What is apocalypse, Linda? War or disclosure of knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
It is from the Greek, meaning change.
Oh, wow.
And that the change comes from revealing. That is the original Greek root. Change from revealing. So it never did mean the end of the world. It meant change by revealing. And the interesting thing for right now is that in the New Testament, in Revelation, this huge war that is described at the end, before the 1,000 years of peace, is supposed to start at Megiddo. Go to Google Earth, go type in Megiddo.
Could you spell that for me, please?
It's Megi, and some places do 2 G's and some do 1, and it doesn't matter, it'll still come up. It's Megiddo, Miggido.
Perfect.
It is in northern Jordan, and just look at how close it is to the Syrian border.
Ooh.
The very fact that that Old Testament, New Testament has Megiddo as the beginning of an apocalyptic war. Because war can be it can be change.
Yeah, it can promote change.
Killing. I mean, you can stretch it to war. Yeah. So if in this year or the next few months, if something does explode right out of that Syrian Jordanian border and Megiddo is right there, you guys, it would be, how could a timeline from 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago
know this
still come to pass in 2015, 2016 if there was free will? Right. Because most of the people do not want a war. But what if free will is a kind of illusion? What if, as Einstein, a lot of people don't realize, general relativity, Einstein, all points of a timeline that he said was the fourth dimension were there in place from 0 to infinity. Otherwise, to Einstein, general relativity could only work with time being the fourth dimension. Everything had to be in place. That was one of the big arguments. Einstein was, there is no free will, everything is written. And today, people in quantum mechanics will say, no, that's not true, that the future is only falling into place like some sort of a revolving spinning lock. It falls into place as the pressure of the atoms, molecules, matter, dark energy are pushing forever against this transition that is always the future and the present colliding. And they keep, the tumblers keep falling into patterns. You have two completely different points of view about time between Einstein and quantum physicists now. And I bet the four of us we have had moments in our life where we would swear we had no free will about the direction of our life whatsoever.
Many times.
And then there would be other points where I could say I had impact on the color of what I was doing, but I never was able to change the general direction. I find this to be one of the most fascinating of all of the philosophical, spiritual questions ahead of us, and it comes right down to Einstein versus quantum mechanics.
Especially if we chose it from non-physical, from the divine, before we were born into a physical body. And then you've got to tie all that into it. This is why we love you so much.
And Linda, will you please come back again?
Oh, please.
Please.
This is fun.
Yes, it is. Well, we're enjoying it way more than I'm sure you do, but because you get this all the time.
Yeah.
And you are one of our favorites.
By far.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you. And unfortunately,
we talk like this in the entire planet.
I know.
Just a conversation and get things done without egos
from
and
love,
judgment. And yes, and I think this is
we
where it all
love
begins.
Ooh, we're going to call this love formation.
Oh, love for me. Well, everybody, I know everybody in the chat room, everybody listening, people on our iTunes tune in, now on iHeartRadio, and on our YouTube channel. You guys, please go to earthfiles.com and check out Linda Moulton Howe.
It's got a plethora of information like you wouldn't believe.
So much. And thank you, because I'm going to give it. I'm going to give you this. Oh. There you go. Hit the wrong button. And an applause. Yay!
Yay!
All right, well, thank you. Come back and
we'll do this again.
We have like 30 seconds before the next show starts. It's called Shar Vision with Shar Margolis, one of the world-renowned psychics. I hope you guys tune in for that. Linda, love you so much.
Love you.
Come back.
Happy holidays.
All right.
Love you guys.
Bye-bye. And thank you for everybody tuning in. Please go to truthbetoldwebtv.com to find out other amazing guests on Truth Be Told. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.